Hello and welcome everyone. I see the numbers slowly increasing as people are joining us here in this Zoom call. So allow me to welcome you all to today's session, bringing together people from Asia and Europe and across many different time zones to our country-focused workshop series on navigating the science and technology diplomacy ecosystems. For this series, focusing specifically on Malaysia. And today's workshop, we will focus on the role of government strategy and actions in the realm of science and technology diplomacy. And this series, we're very proud to be organizing in partnership with the International Institute for Science, Diplomacy and Sustainability at UCSI University, as well as MIT Malaysia. So I am very pleased to be here and be the one to be guiding you through today's session. My name is Linnea Rignell, and I am a project executive here at the Asia-Europe Foundation, and specifically in the education department where we're organizing this project. Allow me to immediately go into the overview of today's agenda. We have 2 hours ahead of us, and we will begin by opening the session with some welcome remarks from our department director here in the education department, Ms. Reka Tosha, as well as the ASEF governor from Malaysia, Mr. Amisal Fadzil Rajali. My apologies. This will be then followed by an introduction to the science and technology diplomacy ecosystem in Malaysia by Professor Sakri Abdul Hamid, who is a leading expert on science diplomacy in Malaysia, but then also has a realm of experience also internationally. And then as we go into our second hour of today, we will be joined by distinguished guests in a panel discussion where they will be sharing their insights and perspective on specifically the role of government in the intersection between science, innovation, technology, and diplomacy. This will be then combined also with the Q&A section. So you will all have the opportunity to share your thoughts, but also then questions regarding the contents of today's both presentation as well as, of course, the panel discussion. You can use here the Q&A function on the screen. You'll see a specific box indicated for this. And we look forward to hearing your input for this session. But without further ado, I want to immediately hand over the floor to some welcome remarks. So we'll start off with Ms. Reka Tosha, as I mentioned, the department director here in our education department, to welcome you and give an introduction. Reka, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Lina, and good morning to everyone in Europe and good afternoon in Asia. On behalf of the Asia-Europe Foundation, it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to the first webinar in our series titled Navigating Malaysia's Science and Technology Diplomacy Ecosystem. This session marks the beginning of a dedicated 3-part webinar series that will explore different dimensions of Malaysia's science and technology diplomacy landscape, from policy and institutional frameworks. We will also discussing research collaborations and the role of industry and innovation in science diplomacy. Each webinar will offer a very unique perspective on how Malaysia is shaping its place in the global science diplomacy arena. This webinar builds on ASEF's report that we launched recently, titled Asia-Europe Science and Technology Diplomacy Report, in which we mapped the national strategies, priorities, various tools and stakeholders for science diplomacy across 51 countries in Asia and Europe. This report also reflects a growing recognition of science diplomacy as a tool to advance international collaboration, economic development, and sustainable progress. And Malaysia stands out in this landscape, according to our report as well, with its robust policy frameworks and increasing regional leadership. Malaysia is actively shaping science diplomacy within ASEAN and beyond. And now this year, in 2025, as Malaysia is the chair of ASEAN, its role in fostering regional science and technology cooperation is even more relevant. So therefore, we are very honored to organize this series in collaboration with the International Institute of Science, Diplomacy and Sustainability at UCSI University in Malaysia and the Malaysian Industry Government Group for High Technology together. So we aim to spotlight Malaysia's achievements and open the floor for dialogue and discuss opportunities, how one can work closer with stakeholders in Malaysia from Asia and from Europe as well. So thank you very much for joining us today. We hope the discussion will be inspiring and insightful, and then you will stay with us throughout the entire series and you will join us for the next 2 sessions as well. So with this, it's my honor to invite Mr. Amizar Fadzli Rajali, ASEF's governor for Malaysia, but he's also the Undersecretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Malaysia. Thank you for joining us and delivering opening remarks. The floor is yours, Mr. Amizar.
Thank you for the introduction, Ms. Reka Toza. Good afternoon from us here in Malaysia. I would like to also bid Assalamualaikum to all the distinguished guests and panelists. For my remarks, I would like to, first of all, begin by expressing our and what it is that it is an honor for Malaysia to be the first country featured in the ASEF country focus workshop titled Navigating Science and Technology Diplomacy Ecosystem. We are deeply appreciative of ASEF's effort to foster dialogue and collaboration between Asia and Europe, especially in the critical area of science and technology diplomacy, ST diplomacy. We are living in an era of unprecedented scientific and technological transformation. These changes profoundly affect our economies, our societies, and the very nature of international cooperation itself. In this context, ST diplomacy emerges not merely as a diplomatic tool, but a strategic imperative. It is a crucial pathway for addressing global challenges such as climate change, pandemics, food security, and sustainable economic growth. Malaysia recognizes the significance of science and technology as drivers for national growth and international collaboration. Under the innovative leadership of our Ministry of Science, Technology, and Innovation, or MOSTI, we have formulated comprehensive policies aimed at transforming Malaysia into a high-tech nation and a regional hub for innovation by 2030. Our guiding framework, the National Science, Technology, and Innovation Policy, or DSTIN 2021 to 2030, embodies our ambition to leverage innovation as the cornerstone of economic growth, national resilience, and sustainability. DSTIN prioritizes strategic sectors such as digital economy, biotechnology, sustainable agriculture, advanced manufacturing, and green technology areas in which Malaysia aspires not only to achieve domestic success, but also to strengthen international partnership. This comprehensive framework illustrates Malaysia's vision to achieve inclusive economic growth, robust innovation ecosystem, and global excellence through strategic STI interventions. The initiatives under DSTIN, thrust number 6, are also designed to enhance Malaysia's involvement in global scientific communities, improve international competitiveness in key research areas, and support effective cross-border partnership. Core strategies involve strengthening international science, technology, and innovation, STI networks, participating in global dialogues, and positioning Malaysia innovation and research on international platforms. Such actions aligns with our chairmanship of ASEAN in 2025, further amplify our role in regional and international science diplomacy, which I would like to touch upon today. Ladies and gentlemen, science diplomacy bridges nations, cultures, and ideas, fostering collaboration on global challenges while promoting peace, equity, and sustainability. It relies on trust, security, and openness, making it essential in addressing today's challenges. At the heart of science diplomacy, it is the understanding that knowledge is not a zero-sum game. Open science, which involves the free exchange of scientific knowledge, can accelerate progress, foster innovation, and ensure that scientific advancements are accessible to all. Whether we are discussing vaccine development during a pandemic or breakthroughs in renewable energy, open science provides a pathway for sharing knowledge to address global needs. It ensures that the benefit of STI reach beyond the laboratories, and then those solutions are available to everyone, everywhere, every time. This delicate balance between security and openness requires robust international cooperation, which is where science diplomacy truly shines. By facilitating dialogue and collaboration across borders, science diplomacy allows countries to establish common framework for secure and open science. Through science diplomacy, nations can negotiate policies that promote transparency, foster mutual trust, and ensure that sensitive research is managed with care while still make valuable knowledge accessible to the global community. Ladies and gentlemen, as the chair of ASEAN in 2025, Malaysia aims to leverage this opportunity to enhance its role in facilitating science diplomacy, which is a crucial aspect of regional cooperation and integration. Our goal is to guide ASEAN towards greater economic resilience, technological transformation, and sustainable development through collaborative science, technology, and innovation initiatives. One of the initiatives introduced by Malaysia is the establishment of the ASEAN Technology Startup Ignite, led by the Ministry of Science, Technology, and Innovation. This initiative focuses on startup as a priority economic deliverable for 2025, aimed at fostering innovation and collaboration in the region through programs supervised by the Committee on Science, Technology, and Innovation, COSTI. These programs includes the announcement of the ASEAN Startup Year at My Startup NXT, the launching Startup ASEAN at the KL20 event in Kuala Lumpur, and the hosting of the Startup ASEAN Summit, which will be the hallmark moment with our Prime Minister of Malaysia as the opening officiant. It is Malaysia's hope that the priority economic deliverable will help establish a centralized ASEAN-level startup initiatives and effectively execute activities aimed at facilitating startup go-to-market strategies, fostering regional collaboration, promoting innovation and entrepreneurship, as well as attracting foreign investment and also creating job opportunities. Malaysia's efforts envision a region rapidly moving forward, where ASEAN startups will have a seamless business environment with a centralized platform that supports the startup ecosystem with market expansion, searching for high potential talents, connecting with global investors, and many more. Furthermore, it is Malaysia's hope that these initiatives will contribute to the growth and success of startups at different stages of development, ultimately fostering a vibrant and sustainable startup ecosystem in ASEAN. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, Malaysia's vision is closely aligned with the goals of the Asia-Europe Science and Technology Diplomacy Initiative for Young Leaders. This initiative emphasizes the importance of youth engagement and capacity building in science diplomacy. Our country is dedicated to nurturing young talents and equipping future leaders with the knowledge, skills, and networks necessary to navigate and influence the global landscape of science and technology diplomacy effectively. Let us leverage this valuable opportunity to forge stronger, mutual beneficial relationship, enhance our collective capabilities, and ultimately contribute to building a more innovative, inclusive, and sustainable global future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Amisal, for your welcome remarks and for introducing a bit of the background also of what is currently happening in Malaysia and the initiatives being brought forward from different aspects in the country. Thank you very much. And also thank you to Reka Tosha for the introduction to the initiative to these country-focused workshop series and what we're trying to do here with the Asia Europe Foundation. Thank you both very much. At this point, I would like to move into the next section of our workshop, which is the introductory lecture on the science and technology diplomacy ecosystem or landscape in Malaysia. And to help us along the way for this, we are very pleased to welcome Professor Sakri Abdul Hamid, who is the founding director of the Institute for Science, Diplomacy and Sustainability at UCSI Malaysia. He has previously served as the science advisor to the Prime Minister of Malaysia and has also been a member of the UN Secretary General's Scientific Advisory Board. Professor Sakri is and has played a number of key roles in numerous global but also national science and sustainability initiatives, including co-chairing the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, as well as leading the Malaysian delegation to several UN biodiversity and climate platforms with his scientific background. He is also one of the founders of the International Network for Governmental Science Advice, or INSA, and the patron for the INSA Asia chapter. So thank you very much, Prof. Sakri, for joining us today, and we look forward to hearing your presentation. With that, I would like to hand over the floor to you, and we're all ears to hear your insights on the Malaysia ecosystem.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for having me here today. Let me recognize all the participants of this webinar and also welcome this initiative of ASEF to initiate this process of science diplomacy in the region. And also it is very timely because the focus on science diplomacy has gained a lot of global attention. In particular, late last month, some of us were attending the first global ministerial science diplomacy conference convened by UNESCO in Paris. This is also right at the heel of the interest of the European Union in launching its roadmap on science diplomacy with a focus in particular countries in the South. Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin my short lecture on the evolution of science diplomacy in Malaysia. Next slide, please. Let me begin. Well, this is diplomacy per se, actually, what is being practiced by our colleagues in the Foreign Ministry. Mr. Amizal, I appreciate your presence today with us. Next slide. And these are some of the types of diplomacy that we can affix our interest in, ranging from defense, trade, environmental, climate diplomacy, biodiplomacy, and so on. Just to be sure, next slide, diplomacy is a very ancient practice that can be traced back to ancient civilization in Egypt and Mesopotamia, where diplomatic treaties and marriages were used to forge link up between countries. Ancient diplomacy, next slide. In the Islamic Golden Age, this is also very well known, with the emphasis on science, economic, and cultural realm in the history of Islam. Next slide. And on, medieval ages, medieval diplomacy. Next slide. And also where sending of envoys to countries that seal friendship and peace building. And it is a very ancient practice. In our part of the world, next slide, for us here in Malaysia, we are very familiar with the kind of bilateral relations between China and Malacca in the and 15th centuries, where the Sultanate would organize trips to China to pay homage to the emperor. And we are also quite familiar with the uh, travels of Admiral Cheng Ho, one of the Chinese diplomat who frequented Southeast Asia. Next, and in particular, the Malacca, next slide, the Malacca Sultanate would pay homage to China by giving this golden flower, bunga emas, yeah, as a sign of homage to the emperor in China. Next slide. So, ladies and gentlemen, today is quite auspicious because this is the beginning of a visit by the Chinese President Xi Jinping to Malaysia. Also, in response to an earlier visit by Prime Minister Anwar to China. These are all embedded in the normal diplomacy that we know for such a long time. It's predicated on geopolitical connection. Next slide. But today, why the interest in science diplomacy? I would argue this is a mechanism, a platform to solve pressing global problems. Problems like climate change, biodiversity loss, plastic pollution, and of course, achieving the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So, science diplomacy, next slide, is how we use science as a tool in international relation. And this is kind of new, and the apex will be when the world convened the Earth Summit in 1992. Next slide. So, science diplomacy describes how these exchanges and cross-border collaboration of scientists and scientific organization. Okay. Next slide. There are principles of science diplomacy which range from the need for safeguarding scientific values, promoting openness, and also building trust and relationship. Next slide. And since 2010, it was we identified 3 dimensions of science diplomacy: science in diplomacy, diplomacy for science, and science for diplomacy. Science in diplomacy, as you may know, is quite well known. In fact, one of the classic example of science diplomacy is during the Cold War between 2 superpowers, the US and the Soviet Union. When the 2 countries were at loggerheads, the scientific community from both countries was still continuing their relationship. So in the end, to make a long story short, at the end of this very long Cold War from 1949 to 1991, through the friendship of the scientists from the 2 countries, a third world war in the form of a nuclear warfare was avoided. That is a very good example of science in diplomacy. Because then diplomacy in science, there are many. One is the CERN in Europe, and also the Sesame in the Middle East, in Jordan, where scientific collaboration between nations such as the Arab state and also Israel were going on in spite of their animosity. And thirdly, a science for diplomacy. Next. So, in the words of the former Prime Minister of the UK, Gordon Brown, many of the challenges we face today, the one that I mentioned earlier, are international. I mean, like tackling climate change or fighting disease. These global problems require global solution. So no one nation, how strong, how rich, can solve that problem by itself. So that is why it is important that we create a new role for science in international policy making and diplomacy. Next. Two elements of science in diplomacy. One is the famous Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, which advise negotiators or policymakers in climate change, global warming, and IPBES. This is the biodiversity equivalent of IPCC. Next. And the message, this is very important, because the scientists have to go out of their ivory tower. Like the IPCC, its main contribution to science diplomacy is advising on the gravity of global warming today. As you know, we have reached the 1.5 degrees Celsius mark. Based on the industrial level. And in IPBES, a few years ago, there was one assessment that warned that 1 million species of plants and animals are under threat of extinction. Next slide. Simply put, the reason being, instead of an infinite Earth, we are now on the cusp of a finite Earth due to human activities and our unsustainable practices. Next. And human actually have dominated the planet, what some people call it the Anthropocene epoch. This picture here is very telling. Each of those dots, the yellow dots, one dot represents an aircraft in flight as we speak today. Look at the numbers of dots and where the activities are in Europe, North America. But this depicts how humankind have conquered the sky, so to speak. And next one, this is coupled by a problem with climate change, biodiversity loss. Next one, and pollution of single-use plastic. Those are the problems. Next one, which are already known by the scientific community, like the work of Rachel Carson on Silent Spring. Next, and also the work of the Brundtland Commission, which introduced this so-called element of sustainable development through this seminal work, Our Common Future, which leads us to the apex of science diplomacy in the world. And that is the Earth Summit in 1992 in Rio, where the sustainability challenges were posed by the question, what are we to do about it? So this is a good example of science diplomacy and multilateral negotiation, which yielded next one in the so-called volume called Agenda 21. It's a roadmap on how humankind could live through the 21st century. Couple next one with the famous SDGs, which was ironed out by heads of governments in 2015, which also coincide next one with the Paris Climate Accords, where the world come together to develop a blueprint on how to manage global warming. And finally, coupled with this Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework in Canada in 2022. So that is one part, the second part of science diplomacy. The second one I want to touch on is this problem of the North in blue and red, the global South. It appears in the scheme of things, the world is divided into two. The rich global North, the industrialized countries, and the poorer global South, which many countries in the UN belongs to. The controversies would include such things as who started the global warming, climate change. Definitely is the global north, but the impact is felt more in the global south. So the question is, what are we to do? The most common sense thing is to urge that countries come together and help out. And this is the context, say, for instance, of providing new and additional funding from the global north to the global south. Here, I outline some of the details which we don't need to go into. Next slide. Next slide here. These are the blame game on biodiversity loss and also on the climate change on the earlier slide. Here again, ladies and gentlemen, I'll draw your attention in our conclusion at the end of this webinar on how I think ASEF, through ASEF, Asia could collaborate with Europe to build a better roadmap in trying to achieve our common interest. Let me now jump into Malaysia's next slide. Malaysia's interest in science diplomacy. I would argue that the golden age of Malaysia's science diplomacy days are in the Earth Summit in 1992, where the Malaysia's delegation not only represent our country's interests, but also the interests of the developing world. Next. And one of the bone of contention among North and South would be the so-called legal principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, CBDR. Our responsibilities are common, but the role will be differentiated, meaning the impact of some of this environmental problem will be felt more in the developing countries, whereas the initial cost would be from the industrialized countries. So it's incumbent in the context that the rich countries should, must, or may provide new and additional funding to mitigate or to adapt to, say, climate change or biodiversity loss. Next. So, in a sense, I would say, as far as Malaysia is concerned, our involvement at the Rio Summit is an example of effective science diplomacy for Malaysia. And how we do that shown here, where there is already a scheme of things. And I think for the information of Mr. Amizal from Wisma Putra, there is a glorious history towards this, whereby there is a national task force, multidisciplinary, multi-ministerial task force chaired by the Secretary General of the Foreign Ministry at that time, Tan Sri Ni Ahmad Kamil. And in that task force, some of the approaches would be the so-called whole of government and whole of society approach, which I'm sure my colleagues who will speak during the panel would support my contention here, where there is a heightened collaboration between government on one part, the private sector, the academics, and also the NGOs. We speak with one voice. And we are well prepared if we are going to go on negotiation, like for negotiating the climate change and the Biodiversity Treaty, which was signed in 1992. We have monthly meetings, and we have documented countries' position. Next. And this is coupled by Malaysia's proactive role to act as an honest broker in multilateral meetings. As a small country, Malaysia aligned itself with bigger groupings. Example, the group of G77 in China, the non-aligned movement, the like-minded developing countries, and ASEAN. And to belong to this group is really a game changer. So it is in this context I also, as I look at the possibility of collaboration in ASEF, ASEAN itself or Asia itself should work closely with the European Union to develop a collaborative framework to achieve world prosperity. Of course, in the case of Malaysia, we also champion the causes of the global south. So, next slide. With that kind of proactive role and high profile performance, championing things like Antarctica, as a common heritage of humankind and all this protocol. Malaysian diplomat, like the likes of Tan Sri Razali Ismail, the gentleman in Songkok with the late Kofi Annan, easily got elected as the president of the UN General Assembly post the Rio summit. He was also the first chair of the United Nations Sustainable Development Council, I think. Next. So all that is also based on a number of ongoing framework, which Mr. Amiza also mentioned earlier on. This is embedded in an ongoing active national policies and framework, which I outlined here. Next. And things like what we mentioned here, which are also embedding the role of science in the regular Malaysia development plan. For instance, in the 12 National Malaysia Plan, we include developing SCI talent, accelerating technology, role of STI in economic growth, and all and all. And in this context, Malaysia within ASEAN sees the collaboration in the grouping in STI is very important. Next. Next one. Yeah, I don't need to dwell on this. By the next one, sorry. We are ongoing active in the respective treaties, like the Framework Convention on Climate Change and also Biodiversity Convention. Next one. This is my last slide. Malaysia's leadership demonstrates our commitment to science diplomacy and environmental multilateralism. It strengthened the country's soft power and international credibility and opened doors for regional collaboration. So this year is a very significant year for Malaysia being the ASEAN chair. One of the plans we have is to champion, to promote the role of science diplomacy in articulating ASEAN views to the rest of the world, and in this context to Europe. And in ASEAN itself, science diplomacy plays a pivotal role. For instance, science diplomacy can facilitate amicable solution to the transboundary haze. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, the transboundary haze have been around for 30 years. The government-to-government effort has been valiant, very noteworthy, but it's still not solving the problem fully. So there is an interest in the so-called track 2 diplomacy, non-governmental, academics and all, to work behind the scene to find a solution. And that solution is predicated on science. The other one is the very contentious South China Sea, which is now replete with implication on the geopolitical level. Can you imagine if science can develop a solution whereby we can develop a so-called zone of peace. And third one here is the so-called biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. These areas beyond national jurisdiction is not the sovereign concern of any state. So it's still quite lawless. Right now, things are being worked out on how to manage this high seas area. So those are some of the concerns. I know there are many more things, but let me stop at this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Sakri, for those insightful words on the ecosystem in Malaysia. We really appreciate being able to get the history of science and technology diplomacy, both from an international perspective, but then how that has influenced the progression of science diplomacy in Malaysia, and then looking forward also to seeing what the plans are for the coming years in Malaysia as well. At this point, I would like for us to move into our panel discussion, and I'll ask Professor Sakri to stay on, as he will be chairing this discussion onwards. But allow me to then ask a number of guests to join us here. First, I would like to introduce Dr. Gary Teixeira, who is a Malaysian climate policy expert with over 2 decades of experience in sustainable development, also in greenhouse gas mitigation and international climate negotiations. My apologies. Everything is going. There we go. He is also a council member of the Climate Governance Malaysia and an adjunct faculty at the Asian School of Business. He has previously served as the Deputy Undersecretary for Climate Change at the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment in Malaysia. And besides this, Dr. Teixeira also is a consultant to international agencies and advises on carbon markets, readiness, low carbon transition pathways, as well as ESG frameworks. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Next with us, we have Professor Dato Noor Ain Mukhtar, who is the chairman of the board of UMT Yaya Holdings. And Professor Mukhtar is an oceanographer, my apologies, as a background, and a science policy expert with a distinguished career in higher education and marine governance. So previously, she has served as the Vice Chancellor of University Malaysia, Terengganu, Director General of the Department of Higher Education, as well as the Chairperson of the National this is a difficult word for me, it seems, Oceanography Directorate in Malaysia. Her work has been instrumental in strengthening Malaysia's marine diplomacy, blue economy strategies, as well as academic research excellence in oceanography. Thank you very much for being here with us today. Next up, our third speaker of today is Dr. Naziri Yahaya, who is a senior environmental governance expert in Malaysia and currently an adjunct professor at UCSI University and the International Institute for Science, Diplomacy and Sustainability. Currently serving also as director of Mind Consult as well, a leading engineering and consulting firm in Malaysia. Formerly, he's been the Deputy Secretary General of the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, where he oversaw the development and implementation of Malaysia's major environmental and sustainability strategies. Dr. Naziri played here a critical role in Malaysia's participation also in multilateral environmental agreements, including the Convention on Biological Diversity, the CBD, where he also contributed to the national agenda on green growth, integrated water resource management, and pollution control. So thank you very much, and allow us to welcome him here today.
Thank you.
Then, of course, last but not least, I would like to welcome Dr. Siti Hafsiai-IISDS, who is an associate professor and a legal scholar at University Malaya. specializing also here. We see a theme in environmental law, climate governance, and international environmental agreements. Our academic and advisory work explores the intersections of environmental law, transboundary resource governance, as well as institutional reform. Dr. Hasiaya is a frequent speaker at legal and science policy forums and plays here an active role in educating the new generation. So here focusing, of course, on youth and professionals on climate and biodiversity regulations at both a global and regional level. So thank you also to Professor Hasiaya for joining us and to all of the speakers here today. At this point, with those introductions, I would like to hand the floor back to Professor Sakri to lead our panel's discussion. So Professor Sakri, the floor is yours again.
Thank you very much, Linnea. Just to add to the bio that you just described, we are very fortunate to have the participation of these four distinguished Malaysians at very short notice. I must apologize for the short notice, but I must thank you for your readiness to participate. Ladies and gentlemen, if there's any people that are very knowledgeable on science diplomacy in Malaysia, this has to be the four of them. I've rearranged the sequence of discussion. I think we beam it on the screen here. And the first round would entail a comment of 3 minutes from each speaker. Then we move into the second round of 3 minutes again. Yeah. The questions, I know they can answer them hands down. Let me start with Dr. Nazri, who is not only a negotiator, he's also a senior government official and also an academic. So, Nazri, the question to you, 3 minutes. What is the priority for Malaysia in terms of science diplomacy? Nazri, are you with us?
Yes, thank you, Tanri. Yes, priority in terms of science diplomacy. The priority here today for Malaysia, if we were to talk with science diplomacy, is actually the knowledge and expertise and the application of the knowledge itself. See, as you know, science diplomacy involves two things. In 3 minutes, there is the hard science and the soft science. In Malaysia, the hard sciences is mostly from our departments, from our technical, from our university, whereas the soft sciences come from the administrative and diplomatic officer which head the ministry. So the priority in terms of summary is how to converge or comply these two different entities to make them into one holistic team. I think that is the priority now. 3 minutes?
Good, very good. In fact, this is a very realistic expectation in terms of capacity building. Let me move to Gary. Gary, the question is, what are some of the issues that are being faced by developing countries or countries in the global south? I pose this question to Gary, ladies and gentlemen, because he was one of the top negotiators representing the global south in the Paris Climate Accords in 2015. So he has it. Gary, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tan Sri Zakri, for your kind introduction remarks and for the question as well, which I think is a very important question. We are in unprecedented territory in terms of the temperature rise that we are seeing in the atmosphere, particularly in the last 2 years, 2023 and 2024. And what we're beginning to realize is that there are a lot of slow onset events that can have a tremendous impact on developing countries, because slow onset events can give rise to sudden onset events. Just one example is, the glaciers, as they retreat and leave behind these empty glacial valleys, particularly in the fjordlands in the north. What we are finding is that they are leaving behind very unstable topographical situations, because as you know, glacial valleys are U-shaped. And when a glacier is no longer there to support the slope on either side of the glacier, we can have extremely cataclysmic landslides. And the fact that these occur into water bodies means that we have the prospect of what are mega tsunamis. So these are areas of study, including underwater landslides that can give rise to mega tsunamis, volcanic eruptions that can give rise to underwater landslides and mega tsunamis. So these are areas that our developing countries are very vulnerable to. The Honga Tonga Ha'apai volcanic eruption, caused a tsunami that went all the way to Santa Clara and killed people in Peru. These are things that are off of the radar, but they point out areas of vulnerability for developing countries that many, if not most developing countries are ill-prepared to address. And it's only through these diplomatic channels sometimes that the awareness regarding these hazards that arise from slow onset events can be communicated to developing countries to enable them to prepare more adequately for these types of events. Because otherwise, there's a very real probability that developing countries will be blindsided by these events. Thank you, Tan Sri.
Thank you, Gary. I'll come back to you. The third panelist would be Professor Noraini Mokhtar, who is a specialist in the field of marine and oceans, and also a former Vice Chancellor of University Malaysia, Terengganu. Dr. Noraini, you can tell us, what are some of the hot button issues in your field of marine and ocean policy that relate to the South China Sea?
Thank you, Tan Sri. Thank you, Tan Sri, for the questions. As you mentioned about the South China Sea, it's about the ocean around us. But Malaysia, we also have other parts of the sea for East Malaysia, Sulu, Sulawesi, and Andaman Sea. But when you talk about South China Sea, because of the different multi-countries, multi-nations involvement in the Southeast Asia, you always come up with the geopolitical issues coming first. But later we realized that the potential of the ocean, because in the equator area, it is comprising the highest biomass in terms of ocean productivities. And for that reason, competition and, for the economic reason, countries looking for food security in terms of fisheries, but at the same time as the resources like natural for the seabed, mining, exploration, and so forth. So with this, I would like to relate to the importance of science diplomacy, where we already have the science and technology innovation policy from Malaysia, which is from 2021 to 2030, as mentioned earlier. So I would like to mention about how to improve in terms of the challenges in coordination of these very complex multi-ministries and agencies that involve in the matters related to the ocean. As we realize that under the UN Ocean Decade 2020, also we have the importance of ocean science, where it's emphasized that we want to reduce, pollution, biodegradation, and for food security, and we need to have these certain skill sets and the talents for the development. For this reason, it's already there in our policy. How do we implement and actually walk the talk in terms of by having diplomacy, where we can relate to our cooperation? For example, here with EU, in terms of collaboration, where the issues like digitalization, mapping of the oceans, the technology transfer, because under the UNCLOS, as Malaysia is also signatory of the UNCLOS. But the thing is, when we address the issue of management in terms of policy implementation, we still are lacking. And we should also look into the sustaining the talent development, as well as improvement in terms of the uptick of having investment for the R&D, commercialization, and so forth. For this reason, I would think the different culture, even up to the community level, the federal laws as well as the state laws is very complex. It's not only involved about science and technology innovation, but it probably helps in terms of upskilling entrepreneurship, at the same time of the other discipline like social economy impact, as well as the international maritime law. So at least for this reason, I think we need to really have this, creating this awareness, greater awareness through the youth. So whereby under the UN Ocean Decade, they have a special early career ocean professionals looking into ocean literacy, where they want to mobilize at the global level as well as the national level. We have the young people involved in advocating. So I think science diplomacy could be one of the things that could really become a catalyst. That's for this reason, despite we are talking about issues about illegal fishing, competition of our resources, but we're talking about cooperation for marine scientific research, which we can do better in terms of joint development. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Nuraini. Can I have the question just now? Sure. I have another set of questions in round 3, but okay, I missed Siti. Siti, sorry, you're still not audible. Your question here is from the perspective of a legal practitioner, and you are a lawyer, and your involvement in the plastic treaty, which is still being unresolved. What are the challenges facing developing countries in managing all these plastic waste, and how do you weave our concern into this global plastic treaty?
Thank you, Tan Sri, Prof. First of all, I would like to make some clarification that I'm not from University of Malaya. I'm from University Technology Mara. So based on my experience involved in the negotiations of the plastic treaty, addressing plastic waste crisis in global south require a multifaceted approach, combining a legal frameworks, sufficient resources, infrastructure developments, governance, and meaningful international cooperation through an effective global plastic treaty. This is why, because if we look at the challenges in the global thought itself in managing plastic waste, we have actually some these challenges is intertwined actually, creating hurdles to achieve a circular economy, and also how to reduce the harm of plastic pollutions. So first off, the challenges is limited legal frameworks, because most of these countries, they do have weak legislations. So these legislations lack comprehensive law for plastic, which results in outdated and fragmented regulations. And secondly, even though they have the law, but they have a very weak enforcement. This law is very beautifully formulated, developed, but with the weak enforcement due to funding and technical constraints, leading to non-compliance. Another one is inconsistency of the regulations. Varying regulation across jurisdiction create loopholes that hinder national strategies. Sometimes, yes, it happens. Sometimes we have a national law, we have a federal law, we have a state law. So this one can become a jurisdiction's issues, jurisdiction overlapping, and it leads to a weak legislations and loophole in some of the provisions. And also, we look into the informal sector challenges. For example, the informal waste sectors, vital for recycling, operating outside legal framework, they present a difficulty in integrations with this law. So that one is on the terms of the regulations. Another one is on the insufficient resources. Of course, limited budget, lack of expertise, very dependent and reliance on aid, external and internal aids. And the next one is, Tan Sri, on the inadequate infrastructures. So they have limited collections, lack of proper waste collections that leads to the open dumpings, illegal dumpings, insufficient recycles capacity. So we are talking not only from the perspective of upstream, but also lead to the midstream and also the downstream. So from the downstream perspective is the inadequate infrastructures, like I mentioned just now. Not only that, they have the scar disposal facilities, the engineered landfills, and also the sanitary landfills is also really lacking in these countries. So lead to environmental contaminations. And another one is informal waste picking. So because of the cruciality of the livelihoods, it's often occur in unsafe conditions. And another one is transboundary waste issues, of course, imported waste burdens, quality control of the challenges, because imported waste may contain non-recyclable materials. So they have a problem to segregate the waste, and complicating issues with the local managements. And the last one, Tan Sri, is on the social economic impact, the livelihood concerns, because most millions of them, they depend on informal waste picking. So they necessitating consideration in transitions to formal systems. Another one, with regards to socio-economic concerns, is actually on awareness deficits. So limited informations or ignorance of informations in the public engagement lead to plastic pollution, and because there is no responsible behavior. And the last one, I would say that on the governance issues, because there is a coordination gaps, ineffective coordinations, collaborations among agencies. And second one is corruptions, because waste management, sometimes they want to divert the resources and hinder regulations. And the last one is on the data deficiencies, because lack of reliable data makes tracking process and monitoring process make very challenges for these countries. Okay, so that is the challenges in waste management and waste pollution in those global source countries, Tan Sri.
Thank you, Dr. Siti, for a comprehensive response. I have another set of round two questions, but I'm going to detour from that. I'll answer some of the questions from the floor. Dr. Nazri, in your response, you mentioned about one of the priority for Malaysia is on capacity building, training of experts in negotiation, in the art of science, diplomacy. I want you to elaborate on that from your very own experience. I think one of the things we experience, Nazri, is people like you and I, and also Gary, learn on the job. We have been thrown into the deep end of the pool when we were asked to represent our country in this negotiation. Somehow we survive, of course. But I want to ask Dr. Nazri, is there any way forward in training of officials, training of negotiators, I have some ideas. For instance, it can be from a short 3-day course to a 10-day course. even a 3 months course or even enrolling in a master's course in science diplomacy. But I want to hear from you, from your own experience. Go ahead.
Yep. Okay, as you know, in Malaysia, the approach in negotiation lies on two, as I mentioned, two different identities. Yeah. One is the negotiator that is from the ministry, which are strongly from PTD, Administrative Diplomacy Officer, which have no technical bond. For example, they are mostly what they call it, economists, psychology, diplomatic, like MOF. And the other hand, we have with us the officer from department, which are technical department. For example, from DOE, from FRIM, from meteorological department. Now, the issue is how to handle. During our time, I'm lucky, as you say, we learn the hard way. But basically, during my time, I'm lucky because I have a background in science. So I'm a biologist. So I integrate policy. Now, back to the how I want to do this, because a 1 month course, 1 year course doesn't sufficient. What is important is the consistency and personally on the job. What I'm trying to say that for technical department, academician, they have institutional memory. Yeah, they don't move around. If frame, they will frame forever. If they are from Hutan, they are Hutan forever. From if you are a lecturer in biology, law, they'll be forever. But for the negotiators who are journalists, the PTD, they serve only 3 years or 5 years. After 5 years, they change a new one. Then the technical people have to teach them again back. So now, they must have a collaboration wherein the institutional memory, people for institutional memory that is from the department, from the university, stays there, and be in the team. So whoever comes in, they are able to stand by. For example, I remember Tan Sri, that's how you become excellent. Remember, you chaired our biodiversity policy, whereas you're academician. So you learn the domestic policy right at the start. Then you come on board with us in the negotiation. First an advisor at the back. Then you go to another level where you are the negotiator itself. Like you, Ambassador Teng Wen Lian, who are good in diplomacy and also the scientific expert. Right now, that's a missing there in Malaysia. That's a missing because we move. So I presume last time when we were there, remember we designate a university. For example, last time we designate University UKM in biology, in biodiversity, in climate change. But now everybody doing everything. So like Professor No said, we have experts. But during my time, when I asked for the name of expert, they can't give the name. They don't have the database who and who. University they have, maybe in UITM they have, but then in the ministry don't have. When I must have, during my time, I have difficulty when they said they have. When I ask who in biology, who in climate change, who ozone. Right now, there's more expert in biology, biodiversity, climate change, of course, on plastic, because we have a department specified on plastic, on that. But on others, you don't have that. So back to your question, how to move on? There must be an institutional memory whereby officers in that ministry goes for a long time there, and also there's backup. If you don't back up, you move, then the institutional memory is lost. But we depend on the department and the university to provide the input. That's where we survived last time.
Thank you, thank you, Nazri. In fact, I want to relate to what you just said to a question posed by the participants of this webinar. If you can join me in reading that. And the question is, to what extent can science diplomacy bridge the knowledge gap between developed and developing countries regarding emerging environmental hazards, and what tools should be developed to ensure that developing nations are not marginalized in forecasting and responding to such events? In fact, if we can liken the developed as Europe and developing countries as Asia, this is where one point of relevance that we could come out from this webinar. Dr. Nazri, you can respond to this.
Yes.
And I also want Gary to come in. Nazri, you have the floor first.
Yeah, it goes back to my contention just now. Persistency and consistency in negotiator. If you remember, I went for negotiator many years. I saw this from China, from America, the same person for 15, 20 years is there. Until I saw the chief negotiator is about 70. But my team is only young guys because they keep on changing. So they don't have the instant memory. I remember last time when we discussed, they said, can't you remember? That's what we discussed in the third COP. This guy is new. What is the third COP decision? They don't have that thing. So back to be, if we want to be in the forefront, the negotiator and the expert, scientific, must be there for a long time. That's it. That's the only answer that I can give you.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Tan Sri, for the question. Okay, so I began answering this question in the first part when I was talking about emerging threats from slow onset events that can develop into sudden onset. Also, there's a lot of emerging science in the developed countries now regarding updates on how high sea levels were at much more recent times than they were in the past. We now have soil cores coming out from under the Greenland ice with twigs and even insect parts in them, indicating that as recently as 400,000 years ago, just before Homo sapiens came out and joined the Homo heidelbergensis and Homo neanderthalis, on the rest of the world, came out of Africa, that there were already long periods of time when Greenland did not have any ice cover. Now, you know that currently Greenland has up to 3,000 feet of ice cover, and it's the biggest island in the world. And if very recently it's been without ice, that means that in the very recent past, the sea levels have been much higher than they have been. So there's a huge gap in terms of the environmental hazard planning, where the information lies with many developed countries. And in many ways, the skills for strategy making and planning to adapt to this new reality as a consequence of climate change is simply not making its way to the developing world. So Malaysia, I think, is at an interesting stage. If you look at the negotiations overall, we've moved more from arguing over the rules and modalities of the instruments and protocols that we want. We are now in more of an implementation stage. And in this implementation stage, what negotiators should actually be working with is actually pairing together a sort of corporate economic negotiation with a scientific negotiation. So issues like transition financing, issues like pure applied and commercialized science, issues like regional policy making, for example, on a region like the Mekong Delta, for example. So we should really be looking at these multilateral tripartite agreements to actually manage some of these major areas. For example, sea level rise and the Mekong is a catastrophe in the making, and it's going to impact many countries. So when you combine diplomacy and science, we find that we have unique opportunities to bring private sector funding, blended financing, long-term financing like bonds and sukuk, and then use them very creatively in the multilateral environment to develop the kinds of strategies and plans that will make sure that even as we have these slow onset events that could result in sudden onset events, that we are still preserving the core of food security, water security, and minimizing the shocks on the economic systems within some of the most vulnerable parts of the world. Thank you, Tan Sri.
Thank you, Gary. Very good responses from Dr. Nazri and Dr. Gary. And I hope our colleagues from Europe would also take notice of what we just expressed and possibly in the future reflect on the kind of collaborative trajectory that we could take together. The next question is for Dato Noraini, and this is also from the participants. I like this question. How can S&T diplomacy be made meaningful for population in Southeast Asia who live below the poverty line? This is very interesting. And I want to tell you why. I used to be the science advisor to my prime minister for several years, in fact, 8 years. And one of the things that I recall, and this is a top politician, the prime minister himself, he would say, I'm not really particular about the kind of advice that you give me, but I wanted you to give me two things. He said, one, can the science advice you give be translated into a higher income for our people? Secondly, can the science advice you formulate create jobs for our people? You see, it's so practical, it's so realistic, and that is the kind of responses that science diplomats, science advisors need to aspire to to uh, if you are to assume that you are doing a good job. So, Professor Noraini, can you respond to this question here? What's the big deal about science diplomacy to the people? All right.
Yeah, Tan Sri, and our distinguished members of the panel, for the coastal communities, for example, in the Southeast Asia, their livelihood actually depend on the resources. You talk about the marine ecosystem with the coastal areas or the marine space that they have for their daily livelihood. But in order to have them survival, when you talk about science diplomacy, I think perhaps their long years of their dependence on the environment, the marine environment, they have the traditional knowledge in terms of understanding about the climate, and then that impact their productivities. But I would think the involvement of the government and the scientific and technological intervention, which actually could add value in terms of sustaining, making them optimizing the resources that they have. So for this reason, the marine ecosystem work that has been done, working closely together with the private sectors and the universities, the research output from the university should be, to be disseminated and shared with the coastal communities. So for this reason, I would think that looking more optimistic in terms of direct or involvement of the people, the marginalized people, but actually we wanted to have that higher income. The government intervention, for example, in terms of providing the infrastructure or the infrastructure, which actually assist to catalyze and optimize, especially for this time we talk about the blue economy. There are many areas, for example, impacting on them, especially for those impacted by the climate change, previously on COVID, and government has to come up in terms of providing the support or intervention. But at the same time, you're talking about certain time is on the subsidies, but in terms of technology, close collaboration and technology transfer from universities by having entrepreneurs or even social enterprises comprising from the local communities, the coastal communities, we actually enhance a lot in terms of bringing them their livelihood to a different level. This is an example that we have seen in terms of the Coral Triangle Initiative, where we have 6 countries coming together with the support of development partners. We can see that the potential of having the marine tourism by having the resource base And then it involves even women, men, women, even the youth actually we can participate in terms of sustaining the potential of the resources, but at the same time looking out for opportunities for having their income double or triple. So for this reason, I would think that more effort through science diplomacy, and it can be, the youth become our ambassadors, for example, to create the alliances for in relation to the making them more what you call it optimistic and become more resilient, especially for those impacted with the national disasters and coastal disasters, and even impacting by the pollution. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Noraini. If you look at the screen, there is a question for Professor Siti. Would you like to take that up, Siti? Don't you think the absence of alternative would be why there can be enforcement? Because if you don't have a viable alternative, you can't enforce anything. Advocacy is anything that must be looked at. Any comments, Siti?
Okay, Tan Sri, on this question is very interesting because a different point, because if we see that alternative could be why they can be enforcements, because if you don't have an available alternative, then you can't enforce anything. So from this perspective, alternative not necessarily a replacement for law enforcement, but is actually to complement, is a rather of viable and acceptable options that individual or entities can choose instead of behavior that law seeks to prohibit. For example, one is on the practicality and feasibility. If there is no practical alternative to a prohibited behavior, enforcement become incredibly difficult, if not impossible. For example, trying to enforce a ban on using certain essential resources when no substitute exists would likely lead to widespread non-compliance and also social interest. So I think I'll give the example to this point. So for example, on environmental regulations, enforcing regulations to reduce pollution from factories is more feasible if there are available and affordable cleaner technologies or alternative production methods. Without this alternative, factories might argue they have no choice but to continue polluting to remain operational. So that one is on the compliant with the environmental regulation. So they need the alternative on what is the best cleaner technologies, what is the best technology to produce the methods to produce the products. And another one is on the traffic law, for example. Enforcing laws against drunk driving is more effective when they are readily available alternative like public transportations, taxi services, or designated drivers. So this alternative is actually give some options, especially to individual and entities, what are the things on how they want to prevent to be actually to be sanctioned by the law enforcers. On the public health, for example, enforcing ban on smoking in public places due to air pollution is often accompanied by the promotion of smoking cessation program and resources as available. So these are the alternative because advocacy is anything that must be looked at, please. So we need to identify and promoting alternative. Yes, agree with you because advocacy group can raise awareness about the need for alternative and push for their development and accessibility and creating a demand for alternative. So with this public awareness campaign and also education, advocacy can create a demand for alternative. So more likely individual and business will adopt that. Influencing policy and legislations. Advocacy through advocacy, be it a community advocacy or academia advocacy, we can push for policies and regulations, legislations, to support the development and the adoptions of alternative, making the enforcements more viable. So this include the subsidies for sustainable practices, tax incentive for using alternative, and also regulations that gradually phase out harmful practices as alternative become more readily available. And last but not least, we can hold stakeholders accountable. So these advocacy groups, okay, not only we encourage them to monitor the activities of environments destructions. We also want them to become advocacy group that can hold governments and corporations accountable and transparent to provide or to facilitate access to alternative. So this can ensure that the enforcement efforts are fair and practical. So the question posed just now is very interesting because it highlights the crucial aspect of effective enforcement. So when we have a viable alternative, the enforcement can become more practical, more fair, and effective. So how we can do this? By the advocacy that need to play a vital role in identifying, promoting, and ensuring the availability of this alternative so that the enforcement can become more justifiable, reasonable, and likely to succeed in achieving the objective of the law itself and a successful desired outcome, what is required by the regulation or the policy. So in a way, advocacy is a bridge that link between the gap between the prohibited behavior and a desirable alternative. So with that, the law is more impactful and sustainable. So that's from my perspective, Tan Sri.
Thank you, Dr. Siti. You make a formidable negotiator because you can argue the case like a good lawyer. Ladies and gentlemen, take a look at the question on the screen, and this can be answered by any of the four panelists. It's a very interesting question which try to oversee the role of Malaysia as ASEAN chair, how we can foster more inclusive and equitable international collaboration, in particular with the European Union. Anyone want to try to respond to that? I could start. Okay, I could start. I think it's a very good question. And if there's anything, this could be an takeaway lesson from our webinar. How could we sort of diffuse any emotive elements in an issue? Let me give you an example. One of the contentious issues between countries in ASEAN, in particular Malaysia and Indonesia, and to a certain extent Thailand and the Philippines, is the EU deforestation regulation. This is this is launched recently, in which there was stipulation if those products are not produced in a sustainable manner, they would penalize upon entry into Europe. This is out of some contentions like allegation of how some countries in ASEAN mistreated the orangutan, you know. And it is a very emotive issue, isn't it? So, is there any role for science diplomacy to diffuse the situation? In a sense, I was thinking one of the problems, and Dr. Nazri could help me out on this. It has always been the position of the Malaysian government to have a balanced approach towards conservation and socio-economic development. Long time ago, when we were very poor and independent, the poverty level is about 47%, and today is less than 10%. And one of the reasons for that, ladies and gentlemen, is the plantation of oil palm, which has alleviated poverty. But at the same time, there is a collateral damage. Sometimes we have this shortcoming of not taking care of our wild animals. But that has been something going off and on. But we are trying our best. There are sanctuaries in Sabah and Sarawak where you could observe orangutan being taken care of by the authorities. So I think that is one example how we can try to diffuse the situation, possibly working closely with our friends in Europe. You know, any response, any additional comments on this, Dr. Nazri? Yeah. On mute, Dr. Nazri, mute.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm looking first. One is as an Asian country, collectively, one is as a single country, Malaysia. As a single country, Malaysia, yes, that's where the science technology comes in. We have to, because they don't believe us sometimes, but we have to emphasize with data how large acreage of jungle, virgin jungle, it still remains. That when we plant palm oil now, we are not using virgin forest, we are using marginal land or reforestation, the place where it is forest. But the most important detail must be seen. How much acreage was last year? How much acreage this year? That's where Scientology database needs more. Because to fight against the developed country, we need the data. It's not good saying that we have 10,000 hectares of virgin land, but when they Google is satellite, they don't see green, they see brown. Brown area. So they say, where is your contention that the area is still forest? So what important, we have to put our act together. We have to tell them where is our palm oil area, what have we done to preserve the virgin forest, as you mentioned, all the wildlife and so on and so forth. Yeah, that's one. Yeah, it's a Malaysian. But as ASEAN, as ASEAN chair, because you know ASEAN is not like European Parliament. They have a very very conclusive, strong position. ASEAN is a very loosely band, so that's important. Where the main players, Indonesia, Malaysia, especially, yeah, especially to put up, to pop up the evidence what you have done and what you done, and we as two countries collectively with our industry to show the European countries that we produce oil palm through our sustainable plant oil management. That's important. And also, we have to, as you mentioned, that to correlate our poverty and also our production in palm oil, where with palm oil estate, we have alleviated our poverty much better. We address poverty issues. I think that's the thing that we must do. Database.
Thank you. Gary, you want the floor? Gary?
Thank you very much, Tan Sri. Just to build on what you said, the ASEAN chairmanship issue is actually a bit ungainly for any one of the ministerial meetings under this chairmanship. If you want to get anything on the agenda at this point in time, you really have to secure the approval and support of all the 10 ASEAN member states. And so it's going to be very difficult to make kinds of changes that we need when we are already in the chairmanship year. Thankfully, we work very closely with the Philippines, and in the coming year, the Philippines actually is going to take over the chairmanship from Malaysia. As you know, we follow an alphabetical system. But going to your primary issue about what can be done within this area, I think it's very, very important to note that even with things that have been mentioned, like the EUDR, we very seldom produce individual commodities with products, services, and inputs from within our national boundaries alone. Things like fertilizer, things like pesticides, all come and cross ASEAN member state boundaries in a very porous manner, depending on demand and supply. And so I've had this discussion before with the Singapore Minister of Environment, where although Singapore as a country does have a carbon tax, which would make its products and services accessible or make sure that its products have access to markets such as the European markets and things like that. But when it comes to the supply chain of these products and services, very often, in fact, almost all the time, they have components that come from outside of Singapore, from ASEAN member states that do not have carbon taxes. And so when she became aware of this, I think that immediately her first instinct, and it was a correct one, was to actually reach out to ASEAN member states, things like entities like SIRIM, like Standards Malaysia, to try to get a dialogue going on how we can have a standard for the region that may not require something in the government, but actually can require something in the private sector, which can move faster. And once we have an ASEAN standard for supply chains and for value chains that can be applied to products and services, immediately then, regardless of which ASEAN member state the product or service originates from, it would be one that is documented well enough and tested well enough, and it should be a recognized and approved label that can be used in any part of the world to verify that our products are indeed sustainable. Thank you, Tan Sri.
Thank you, Gary. There's another interesting question on the screen, and this question is for Datuk Noraini. What are the opportunities and challenges in the Malaysian SMT diplomacy to empower academics to become entrepreneurs, solving societal challenges? Datuk Noraini, in other words, what is saying here, how can academics contribute towards empowering science diplomacy, with their research output? Datuk Noraini, you have the floor.
Yes, Tan Sri, universities provided research R&D funding from the Ministry of Science, from the Ministry of Higher Education, and then there are many other sources from other ministries, depends on the issues. We realized that many universities have come up with a lot of R&D products that actually become useful tools, not to mention also in collaboration with the local community, they come up with some innovative technologies. So in terms of the spectrum of R&D commercialization under the strategic research funding, for example, in MOSTI, I think they have done the inculcation of the STI towards entrepreneurship and for commercialization of products by having promotion of prototype development, as well as facility from the universities for research grant, as well as to create a startup companies. So with this also, when universities are in collaboration with the public sector, with the industries, for example, where the students and then professors are having close collaboration through the PPP program, train and place program, I would reckon that a lot more opportunities for academics to exercise in terms of their knowledge, in terms of the products, in terms of job opportunity for the graduates, as well as the potential of the graduates to become entrepreneurs as well. So for this reason, the ecosystem, even though there are a lot of room to, to be improved in terms of the recipients, in terms of the sustainability of the funding, the complexity is in terms, again, we go back to the governance and the lack of coordination, where to get seed funding, as well as the scaling up their R&D results. For this reason, many private sectors has come up. For example, working towards for the energy, circular economy and bioeconomy. I would like to mention about the for the blue economy, talking about land-based aquaculture and also offshore aquaculture. In fact, Malaysia also received a lot of funding under the Horizon 2020 through the EU program that actually encourage for innovations in food security, in precision farming. But at the same time, when you mentioned just now, Tan Sri, in terms of whole nation approach and opportunities for researchers, in collaboration with other experts from international, at the regional, as well as opportunities for the huge resources, ecosystem services that can be provided by the global south. We have the experts working together as accelerators. So for this reason, I think financial sectors, be it at the international consortium, is there, but the accessibility in terms of getting the grants, we need to have this partnership with the experts from the international as well. So with this also, we also encourage, we just hope that at the national level, the private sector also coming out with this green bond or green research funding to enable for the academics and also graduates to actually come up with new products and new growth in the blue economy, for example. But in collaboration with the industry, there are many industries come forward and talk about mangrove restoration, conservation, but at the same time, in terms of the resources that we have, there are many other byproducts that can be used. This is the area under the national jurisdiction. But of course, at the moment, we also looking into the policy in the direction of the national, Malaysia, for example, to look into the areas beyond national jurisdiction where the technology or the capacity building for the marine genetic resources, the tools that we need. So if we have that, we are so rich with the resources, but at the same time, we need to capitalize on the biotechnology aspect of it to create the academics to work together with the industry sector to scale up their research into products and also in commercial products, especially for the health, for the health reason and also for the food security. For example, in terms of the seaweed project, in terms of the other seagrass, we need conservation. So for this reason, we inculcate the culture for sustainable use, but at the same time, we need to address the issue of sustainability of replanting, also at the same time, large scale effort in terms of providing these ecosystem services for the next generation.
Good afternoon, Noraini. I'm looking at the watch. Time is against us. I think we have time for one question, and I already beamed that on the screen. How can collaboration in science diplomacy between Asia and Europe be further enhanced? I would have preferred this question to be answered by colleagues from Europe who's listening in, but maybe the format wouldn't allow us. So I'm throwing this question, a 1-minute answer from each of the panelists, starting from Dr. Nazri. Dr. Nazri, how can collaboration in science diplomacy between the two continents be further enhanced? 1 minute.
With greater transparency, honesty, and hello, can you hear? Yeah, collaboration can be further enhanced if Europe be able to provide us, not to provide us, to exchange knowledge, to exchange equipment or what, and so on and forth, so that we are able to use the hard sciences better in the whole diplomacy cycle. Thank you.
Gary?
Thank you, Tan Sri. I think it's an issue of investment, and in this case, investment means blended financing, probably a mix of public funds from both countries as well as private funds from both countries, companies that might be able to provide support in terms of technology or licensing, together with what would be considered local content here, the potential financing from states that can provide land, and perhaps even private corporations that can provide the local content needed for these high-tech energy solutions mostly. Thank you, Tan Sri.
Thank you, Dr. Noraini.
Okay. I just hope that through the SDG 17, and we hope to have more enhancements in terms of the collaboration, where we already started on the especially in the aspect of the Ocean Academy, but now we talk about S&T. I would hope that the science and technology transfer method would be more enhanced through the accelerators. So decade accelerators, actually a lot happening in Europe. So I just hope that that can be implemented through our collaboration, and perhaps we can also become like the hub for the ASEAN. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Siti.
Thank you, Tan Sri. So from my point of view is actually we can work together to facilitate knowledge sharing and also exchange. For example, to enhance researcher mobility program. For example, we expand and promote exchange program for researchers at all career stage. For example, Marie Curie program in Europe could establish dedicated fellowships for researchers from ASEAN countries to conduct research in European institutions, and vice versa. So with a reciprocal opportunity for European researchers in ASEAN. And second one is on joint workshops, conference, and seminar, where a series of annual joint workshops could be organized, alternating between Europeans and also ASEAN cities, focusing on the latest advancement in quantum computing, and bridging together leading researchers from both continents. That's all from me, Tan Sri.
Dr. Siti, thank you. Before giving the mic back to Linnea, I would just want to conclude that I think this panel discussion has been very constructive, very interesting, and would form the basis for any actions forward between the two continents. I think there are many or several doable projects that we could embark upon as early as sometime this year to continue this fire burning between our two continents. With that, Linnea, I give back the floor to you. Thank you. Thank you again to all the panelists.
Thank you very much, Professor Zachary, for giving me the floor. I want to also express my gratitude to all of our panelists here today for joining us and for sharing their insights from their various backgrounds, and also for wrapping up and giving us some food for thought on how we can strengthen collaboration between the two regions. It's been very insightful. As someone who doesn't have neither a scientific nor a diplomatic background myself, it's always interesting to both hear about your own experiences working in this field, but then also being able to challenge some of the maybe problems and let's say areas for continued development, and see how we can work forward to strengthen both the system in Malaysia, in the region, and then between the two as well. So thank you to everyone for your contribution. And again, thank you to Professor Zachary for your introductory keynote, as well as for facilitating this interesting discussion with all of our panelists today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. With that, we're coming to a close of today's session, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank also our participants, those who have joined us here today from both Asia and Europe, and for your attention and for sharing also some very interesting questions and also insights into science and technology diplomacy and your thoughts on the developments from Malaysia. We hope that this session has given you a lot of opportunities to learn more also about Malaysia, as well as to build upon this in further collaborations in the future. With that, thank you so much. I would like to give this, take this opportunity also to say that, of course, this is only the first out of 3 sessions that we'll be hosting on the science and technology diplomacy ecosystem in Malaysia. Starting out here today with the government sector, we are moving into next week, focusing on academia and research institutions and their role in science and technology diplomacy ecosystems and how you can work with these as well. On your screen currently is a link or QRs to sign up for the sessions on Malaysia. If you haven't already and you only signed up for this one and you want to learn more about the role, as I mentioned, on academia, but then also in our 3rd session on businesses. We also are conducting similar workshop series on Thailand, Kazakhstan, and Indonesia in the coming months. So you can also scan the QR code here to learn more about those workshops and sign up to learn about what they are doing in this realm as well. As we mentioned in the beginning, as we opened this workshop, we have launched the Asia-Europe Science and Technology Diplomacy Report, which does not only feature Malaysia, but then also 40 more countries across Asia and Europe, as well as the European Union, where we map the strategies, actions, and tools related to science and technology diplomacy, and give some insights there as well on where you may perhaps be able to find different stakeholders, what initiatives are being taken currently, and also a bit of a future outlook, what can be in the pipeline for the work here as well. With that being said, I would like to thank you for your attention. Again, thank you to everyone who joined us and listened in. Thank you to our panelists for your contribution, to Professor Sakri for leading this, to our partners also at MITE and ISDS, for contributing and for partnering with us on this workup and shining a light on Malaysia for this. I wish you all a good rest of your day or your evening, depending on where you are, and I hope that we will see you again back here next week for the next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye all.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.